Welcome back, Sweet Chris here. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the reorder points replenishment method in NetSuite. Now, replenishment methods, if you're not familiar with it, the basic concept is as you're fulfilling either manufacturing requirements or fulfilling sales orders, you need to continuously replenish your stockpile of inventory. And there's several different methods to do so. I will comment briefly on each, but the one we're going to focus on in this video is the reorder points method. And the reason I'm making this video now is because I'm currently in the process of making a full inventory management course where I go over all different aspects about inventory management. So if that's something that's interesting to you, keep your eye out. I will come out with a YouTube video that announces the actual release of that course, which will be in a few weeks. And of course, for most people watching, the video at that point or the course will be released. So at that point, I will include a link up above as well as a link in the description below. So with that, let's get started. All right, I'm here in a specific inventory item, and while the reorder points method can influence your entire inventory, it's really best to understand it and the basic mechanics of it by focusing on one item and how it will be interacting with the reorder points method. So in this instance, we're looking at a gear motor. You can see a little picture of it here. And this is an inventory item that is specifically a lot numbered inventory item. So that means it was produced an entire batch or a lot of similar little gear motors. And we'll be particularly looking at how the reorder point method will procure more of this gear motor. So let's take a look at this. First, we're going to go into edit mode on this record. So now that we're here in edit mode, now before we scroll all the way down, there's a lot of fields here. I have made videos already that cover how to set up items and what a lot of these fields mean. So I'm not going to rehash that information here. I'm really just going to focus on reorder points and really just a few things relating to reorder points in this video, just because there's so much to talk about and I can't have this video go on forever. So we're going to skip through all this information and come straight down to purchasing and inventory in the subtab. Now, the top here, we have a bunch of price and costing information, which is not explicitly relevant to what we're going to show on reorder points. So I'm going to scroll beneath that where we get to inventory management. So this is where we actually set what replenishment method are we using. And you can see right here, we can click on this field and we've got 4 options available. And of the 4, there's really only 2 options that are important to talk about. So first off, we have reorder points, and I'm gonna just describe it very simply, but keep in mind that there's so many different types of business models and industries and B2C or B2B. So I don't want to pigeonhole any of these things. I'll try to keep it as kind of general as possible. But the concept of reorder points is if you've got a tank of water, which is the water is your inventory, as the water level is decreasing, you're going to go below a reorder point, which prompts a hose to be put into that tank and refill it up to a preferred stock level, which is the point you want to get at. So that's the basic concept of reorder points. It is the easiest to use, and in many instances, it serves companies great, especially if you've got very short lead times. Because if you think about it, if your water level dips below that reorder point and it only takes maybe 1 or 3 days to refill it, then it makes it much easier to have such a simple system because it's so rapid to fill the tank back up again. Not to say that it can't be used with longer lead times, but that's just something in general to think with. It is a simpler system. It tends to work very well with shorter lead times. So that's reorder points at the bottom. Up from that, in terms of complexity, would be time phased. The name really explains kind of what you're dealing with. You're influencing based on time how you expect to receive your inventory. And it doesn't tend to be used nearly as much as reorder points and material requirement planning. So there's not no reason to use it, but most instances people will either default to reorder points or they'll move on up to MRP. So then moving on up to MRP, it is a much more complex system that can handle a lot of companies' more complex requirements. So it adds in an entire element of demand planning to how you are replenishing your inventory. And that really requires not just another video, but an entire course just on MRP. So at some point this summer, I will make a course specifically on that, but we'll just leave it for now to know that it is a very commonly used system, especially for more complex or more involved requirements. And then master production scheduling, this is something that NetSuite's been threatening to come out with for quite some time. It's going to be an additional replenish method on top of the other three, but as of now, it has not yet been developed. So what you actually get if you select it is really identical to what MRP delivers. At some point, obviously that will change, but at this point, I'm not aware of any clients that actually use the master production scheduling. You would just select MRP if that's relevant for your needs. So those are the four, and as I've commented on before, we're just going to stick with reorder points for this video. So the next thing I want to comment on here is you can see we've got preferred stock level here, we've got reorder point here, and purchase lead time right here. And each of these has this auto calculate button. So I've unselected all the auto calculates because what it's going to do is basically it's having the NetSuite system look at your information on a certain period of time and automatically decide what it considers your preferred stock levels are for this item, as well as the reorder point, the purchase lead time, etc. Now, it's not to say that it can't do a good job, but in the vast majority of cases, you will understand your items and your delivery, your lead times, these things much better than NetSuite in sort of a simple Simon way will be able to just calculate. So I find that in the vast majority of cases, you do not want to select auto calculate. You just want to go with what you already know are the correct figures for your various items. Especially for the sake of a demo, I have them unselected so that I can actually show you from a manual standpoint how these things work. Now, there are a number of other fields here that are very relevant to reorder points, but I'm really just going to focus on some bare bones simplicity of the system. So I'm not going to get into these other fields at the moment. Do understand that I will cover it in more depth when I get to the inventory management course, but for now, we can skip through this and I'll show you really the fundamentals of how this works. So if we come down here, we come to this sub list for locations, and this is our locations table. It looks like a lot. Really, what we're seeing here is on the left-hand side, we have our locations. So in this instance, let's say these are all warehouses relevant to this subsidiary. This item has a subsidiary that it's tied to, and all the locations that are applicable are listed here. Now, this is all information that's going to be relevant to these locations. I deliberately selected an item that only has inventory in one location just to make it easier to kind of focus and understand what we're looking at. But understand if there's multiple locations, the mechanics are the same, it's just multiplied by those various locations. So let's just focus on San Francisco because that's the only place that we have. The first field that's relevant is quantity on hand. So that's saying, what do we literally have of these gear motors? What do we actually have currently on hand at the San Francisco location? That's very simple. We've got 10 of these gear motors sitting there. I'm going to skip a few fields here that are getting more into costing, and we'll go over to the reorder point. So in my example with the water tanker, if the level has gone down to this certain line, as soon as it goes below that, it triggers you to now purchase more or refill this water tanker to get back up to your preferred stock level, which is this number here. So 12 is that line, and we've actually gone below that. Our quantity on hand is at 10. So we're below the reorder point, and when we have that hose come in to refill it, we're gonna refill it back up to 20. That's our preferred stock level. All of these numbers are editable, obviously, and just some other fields that are applicable. We've got lead time, so how long is it going to take from that hose to come in and actually refill to our preferred stock level. And if you utilize the safety stock method, for example, if you want to handle spikes in demand and things like that, you can put a safety stock level to think with this kind of buffer that you never really want to dip into unless it's an emergency for sales purposes, etc. So those are all the fields relevant here. And when we scroll over, we've got a massive amount of additional fields. This is all related to either time phased or MRP. So they're not relevant for the sake of reorder points, and we can skip over them. So coming over here, we get back to where some of these fields are relevant. And the first one I want to comment on is quantity on order. So up until now, I've been giving this example sort of in a static environment. In other words, the water level goes down to a certain point, it crosses that threshold, you fill it back up. That's not thinking at all with other mechanics that are occurring simultaneously. So for example, even though we might have gone under that reorder point, what if we already have a purchase order that was put in yesterday to refill 10 more items? Well, we don't need to put in a new purchase order today. Even though we're technically below that reorder point, we have a quantity on order, so we don't need to worry about it. In this case, there's 0, so that's not true, but I'm giving this as a theoretical. You could have that quantity on order. And on the flip side of the coin, you could have quantity that's either already committed or allocated. So even though you might be at 15 and the reorder point is only 12, what if you've got 3 sales orders that are pending and those are going to eat up the entirety of your 15? Do you want to wait until that happens before you reorder? Or knowing that those sales orders are coming and they're going to have to be fulfilled, do you want to put in those purchase orders now so you can replenish your supply? So again, currently they're not listed. I'm trying to keep this very simple, but as you have these sales that are constantly coming in, it will factor into that equation on when you need to purchase more inventory. Now going over to the right, we have quantity available, 6. So we had at the beginning of this list, we had quantity on hand was 10. So why do we have quantity available at 6? The reason is just because we have them on hand doesn't mean they're all good gear motors, right? This item, they might not all be usable or sellable. So the way that we can figure out how this number is different from the quantity on hand is if we scroll up here, back up to our subtab, we can come up here to inventory detail. And here's where we can see this inventory item. We've got 2 statuses. One is good gear motors and one is damaged gear motors. So we have 6 good ones and 4 damaged ones. So with those numbers in mind, and don't worry if you don't remember them all off the top of your head, I will be showing you something in a second where they're all laid out. But that is the basics of the information you're going to have available to factor in on an item by item basis how reorder points is applying to it. So now the question is, because when we were looking at those fields, we didn't have anything already on order. We know we're way under the reorder point. We're currently at 6. It should be at 12. So we know we need to order more. So how can we do that? Well, there's a few different ways to do it. One could be creating a new purchase order, but that could take a lot of time if you've got many different items. You have to go item by item, find which ones. NetSuite's come up with a much simpler system that culls all the information you need and proposes it to you to create the necessary purchase orders. And the way to get to that tool is go up to inventory, over to the inventory tab here, and down here to order items. Now, I'm currently in the purchasing manager role, so that's how you would navigate to it in this role. If you're in something like an administrator's role, you would go to the transactions tab in your center, you would go down to purchasing, and you would find this same tool within that. So let's click on order items. It asks us if we want to leave. We say yes, we do. And it brings us to this tool. Now, this tool is just like so many other tools in NetSuite where the top is a bunch of filters and the bottom is the things you're going to interact with. So we can see all these filters here. If we want to limit it by certain locations or certain vendors, we can do any of that. In this case, we obviously don't want to. We'll leave these filters alone and we'll come down here. Now, notice I have time phased, reorder points, planned orders. In this demo account, I have all the features turned on. In many cases, you would only have reorder points set up, in which case you wouldn't have time phased as a tab here. You would only come straight to the reorder points tab. So just be aware of what you're looking at in terms of if you can't find items appearing, you might be on the wrong tab if you have those features enabled. So now that we're on reorder points, we can see it basically queues up every single item that it can see has gone below that reorder point. And we've got 2 items down here that are included in that, but this is the one that we were just looking at. So we can see this is that gear motor and the location is San Francisco. We only had one location, so we can't change that. And we can see what the vendor is. Lancome is the preferred vendor, but we could change it to whatever vendor has the gear motor available for us. The currency for Lancome is defaulted to US currency. And if we scroll over to the right here, this is where we have all the relevant numbers laid out for us. So we can see that the available quantity was that 6 figure. We can see that we have nothing back ordered or on order currently. And our reorder point, as I've mentioned before, is 12. So we're 6 below it. And the preferred stock level is 20. So the math is simple. 20 minus 6 equals 14, which is what we need to order to get back up to that preferred stock level. And then for Lancome, we have a vendor price specifically with that supplier, and that's for $30. So the quantity of 14 is multiplied by the $30 rate, and it comes out with that total value for the purchase order. Now, in this case, we're only looking at 3 items that need to be replenished, but in many situations, you might have 50 different items in any given day that then have to have purchase orders generated. If you've got many purchase orders, the way you handle this is you simply come over here and you select whichever ones are relevant, whichever ones you want to generate purchase orders for right now. Now, if there's 30 totally different vendors for every line item, let's say, then you would have to generate 30 new purchase orders because each PO is going to get its own vendor. However, if let's say 30 items that need to be replenished only have 10 vendors that are supplying all 30 lines, then it will consolidate those POs. So every vendor that is relevant will have their line items all on one purchase order. In this case, I don't want to handle these ones for the sake of this demo. I only want to replenish this one. So let's go over here and hit submit. So it brings us to this page that the system is now generating all the purchase orders that are necessary. And in this case, there's only currently one because we only selected one thing. So it's not started, but if we hit refresh, all right, so it's now completed. We can see that the approval status was approved in this particular case. So if it has to go through approvals, it'll show what the exact approval status is at this moment. It shows the full amount of this purchase order, and we can actually click on this hyperlink and go to the exact purchase order to see all the information that was included there. So we can see that this one was approved, and we can see we've got our gear motor for 14, which would replenish that back up to the preferred stock level. And those are the basics of the reorder points replenishment method. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and if you're interested in a full inventory management course, check out the link below and take advantage of the course. With that, I'll see you in the next video.